another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. Josh and Anthony with you as always. We're having a lot to do tonight. Busy week for Carolina. We're going to go ahead and jump right in to the opening tip, which is brought to you by Rodan and Fields for all your skincare needs. Please call Joey Marlowe at 803-804-0200 and get hooked up with great skincare products. Tonight's topic in the opening tip is yesterday the ACC announced Carolina's schedule for the next 3 years. And we're going to go over this briefly. So starting next year, Carolina will play these teams twice, Duke and NC State as always, Notre Dame, Pitt, Virginia, and Wake Forest. Carolina will play Boston College, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Miami at home, with road trips to Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech. In 2020, of course, they'll play Duke and NC State twice, and they'll play Clemson twice, Florida State, Miami, and Syracuse twice, while hosting Louisville, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and Wake, while traveling to Boston College again, Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, and Virginia. And then in 21-22, Carolina, of course, will play Duke and State twice, Boston College twice, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Virginia Tech, while hosting Florida State, Pitt, Syracuse, and Virginia, and will take road trips to Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, and Wake Forest. Reason why this is important, well, because next year they do start the 20-game ACC slate. We don't know, of course, none of these dates. There has been talk about playing ACC games as early to open the season in November. But I just kind of wanted to talk to you your thoughts on the schedule with the teams that were playing twice and the teams that were only going to once or hosting once. And if there's one thing that you could change about the conference schedule, what would it be?
Well, I mean, one of the things that really sticks out is, before this year, we had played Virginia twice in, 3 straight seasons? And this was the first year that we weren't playing them twice in a while. And so it's, good to see that, of course, next year we'll play them twice. But then after that, the 2 years following that, we won't have to see them twice. And, I mean, if you're a guy that is, all about the competition and everything like that, then, maybe that will not really excite you as much as someone else. But for, a guy that has seen Carolina struggle over the last few seasons with Virginia, and we were talking about that right before we got on the podcast here, it's just a team that really has our number right now. If you can leave them off the schedule, it's never really the worst thing. So not having to play them twice, more than once in the 3 seasons that have been released, and then same thing with Louisville, another team that could be on the up and coming here in the next couple of years. That's always encouraging to see those teams only once on that slate of teams that will play twice a year. But I mean, for the most part, I don't really think that you can really be angry or sad or disappointed about who they're going to play. It seems like for the most part it's pretty spread out. I mean, of course, Duke and State will play, twice a year every year, and that's how it should be. But, if there was one thing that I would change, we saw it again this year, is that 1 week that we have off in the middle of conference play. And, some would say, well, with the 20-game schedule, maybe that'll go away. I don't know if it will. It probably won't, because all that's going to happen is they're just going to shorten the out-of-conference and take 2 games away from your out-of-conference schedule and turn them into conference games. So one would believe that week is probably going to still be there. And, I'm a guy that really is all about momentum, especially when it comes to conference play, and especially in the ACC. And we saw it this year. Carolina built some momentum right before they took that long week off break. Now, they did bounce back after that week off and really got back to the form that they were in. Although, really since that Georgia Tech game, they haven't played their best basketball, but at the same time, they've still won 2 games since then, the Georgia Tech game and the Miami game, before, of course, losing the game to Virginia that we'll talk about coming up. But, for the most part, I don't really have that many issues with it. But if that was, if there was something that I wanted to see changed, I would like to see that week off kind of be eliminated. Maybe space the games out just a little bit more. Maybe not have the Saturday to Monday turnaround that we just saw from Miami to Virginia. But, eliminate that week off and eliminate, players having to take 8 days off in the middle of conference season. season, which kind of snaps them out of what could be a hot streak and allowed some of those teams to continue those hot streaks throughout conference play.
Yeah, hopefully they do find a way to iron that way out. Now, it could have been the way the calendar fell this year, where I think it was 5 weeks in January and 5 weeks in March, but I'm not a fan of that. I'm definitely not a fan of opening the season with conference play. I understand from the aspect of, okay, it's probably going to draw more attention during the heart of football season, but none of these teams are what they're going to be 3 months later, so why have them play each other to begin with? I'm not even a really big fan of Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and Michigan State playing their first game on the neutral floor in the Champions Classic, but that's just my opinion. The one thing I wish I could change is I know Wake Forest isn't great right now, and they haven't really been relevant in about a decade, but I think they should be a mainstay as one of the teams that Carolina plays twice every year just because they're a Big Four school. There's a lot of history and tradition with that rivalry. It means a lot to the conference. And I mean, like we've seen in football where they don't play each other enough to where they schedule a home and home that's not going to count as an ACC game just because these two schools want to play each other. It's important for the state. If I was in control of scheduling, give me Wake Forest every year twice instead of like some of these other matchups like a Boston College. I understand the Louisville and the Syracuses are more sexy because they're two blue bloods, but right. At some point, you got to stay true to your roots and what made this conference as good as it is. But we'll go ahead and move on to the UVA recap. It's now 4 days since the games happened. We didn't, I've been really busy, so I apologize for that. But really, when I think about this game, it was really simple. Virginia shot the ball really well. Carolina didn't. The thing that kept Carolina in the game was they were active on the glass. They out-rebounded UVA 41-29, which really kept them in the game because they only shot 35% from the field and 30% from three. Just another one of those where Virginia bogged us down in the half court, and for some reason we're just not. Virginia bogged us down in the half court. We really struggled against that pack line defense. I've never really understood why we never tried to drive the ball because our bigs could not get any position inside, but we just reluctant to take either really tough threes or really long twos. So that was really frustrating, but at the end of the day, we do Virginia be ready to play. They lost the game before against Duke. They needed this game to kind of keep them in the race with us and the Blue Devils for the first place in the ACC, and they played to their level, and when they play like that, they're as good as anybody in college basketball. DeAndre Hunter and Kyle Guy were great for them, scoring 20 apiece, and Ty Jerome really ran their offense with 11 assists. Really, they just controlled the game, controlled the pace, which is something we talked about in the preview that just simply can't happen. And we're not built to play a 60-possession game, and ultimately that's why I think we got beat.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at it, we talked about it in the preview. We knew that Virginia was going to come out and establish their pace because they do it in every game that they play. They've even, they even have done it, I think, relatively successfully in both games against Duke. I think Duke has had some moments where they were able to speed them up, similar to Carolina, early in the second half. But for the most part, Virginia has controlled the tempo in those games, but Duke really just shot the lights out when they needed to. Carolina didn't, and we talked about that. We said that they would have to have a good shooting night if they wanted to win the game, and they didn't. I mean, you look at the starting lineup, there was only one guy that shot over 50% that was a starter, and that was Garrison Brooks, who was 5 of 8. Everybody else was 50% shooting or worse, including Luke May, who was 2 of 10 from the field, and Kenny Williams, who was 3 of 10. That's simply not going to get the job done. And again, Kobe White finished with 17. You can see once again that, this team kind of goes as he goes, but he shot just 6 of 19 from the field. So while he did end up leading the team in scoring and really was one of the only reasons that Carolina was in the lead for a good portion of the second half, this is still a guy that at times, he does take some shots that you wish he wouldn't take because they are overly contested, and you're saying, look, you just got to find someone else on the floor that's open. I feel like, you mentioned it, they really didn't go inside all that much, and, even if it was just a post touch and then back outside for a three, even just getting the ball inside and forcing Virginia to potentially hedge down, maybe they do the same thing that we saw from Carolina a couple of times where, they get a little too deep inside and it opens up an outside shot. Maybe, a couple of those things could have happened. But, one of the other big factors is that, the bench was pretty much non-existent. And part of the reason of that was because we saw Nazir Little go off with the injury. But Brandon Robinson, 18 minutes off the bench, produced just 3 points and really wasn't quite as effective as we've seen him be on the defensive end in some of the last few games. But you look at the rest of the guys, nobody else that came off the bench played more than 3 minutes. So Carolina really on Monday night, they really just went 6 deep and that was it. And, that's something that we're just really not used to seeing from Carolina. And then, of course, you have the injury late in the game to Cam Johnson, which pretty much forced Brandon Robinson to have to play a good stretch of the game, from about the under 8 to almost the under 4. So, when you look at what, the injuries meant in this game, I think that was a huge part of the story as well.
Yeah, they definitely played a role. We were without Sterling Manley, without Leaky. You lost Nazir Little. He was on the floor, not even 2 minutes of action off the bench. And then Cam was out for the biggest 4-minute stretch of the game. And, look, if you would have told me that Carolina shot as bad as they did and they had 2 of your most important players leave the game, one for most of them, the other one at the biggest juncture, I'd tell you Carolina's probably going to be in trouble, and that's exactly what happened. Brandon had an off night where he's been giving us production when he's gotten the minutes, but that's going to happen. And, ultimately, we just weren't good enough Monday to get the job done. Virginia was. It's just one of those where they've got our number right now. Tony Bennett is kind of like the Rick Barnes of the ACC. He knows how to play against Roy Williams' team better than anybody, probably outside of Mike Krzyzewski. So, we're going to try to keep plugging along and getting better at that. It just sucks because we don't get a return game with them. So when it comes down to a tiebreaker situation, we lost this game, and this could affect seeding in the ACC tournament and even in the NCAA tournament. And, when you lose on your home court, it's always a tough pill to swallow, especially a top 10 matchup where Carolina had won, I think, 11 straight games against teams that were ranked higher than them were on their home floor. So let's start a new streak. But the good news is they get a chance to get back to the winning ways tomorrow against a struggling Wake Forest team. Wake comes in only 9-14 overall, 2-9 in conference play. Not the kind of season Danny Manning and his team imagined. It's just been a rough couple of years since they lost John Collins early to the NBA, who's now he's a productive forward for the Atlanta Hawks. But this team just simply bottom tier of the ACC. But they have a home win over NC State on their home floor, so I know State isn't as good as we all thought they were at one point, but they're still in the topper tier of the ACC. So they're more than capable of giving Carolina a game tomorrow, especially with they're going to be without Nazir Little, Leaky Black, or with no Sterling, no Leaky, and potentially no Nazir and no Cam.
Yeah, if all of those come to fruition, that's going to be a depleted team for sure. And more than likely, you're looking at a team that maybe, if you're lucky, can go 6 deep with Seventh Woods coming off the bench. And Seventh, he'd probably have to play significant minutes at both point guard and potentially shooting guard as well if they need him to come off the bench. So, yeah, depending on the injuries, this could be a trickier game than I think people realize. But, if we're looking just talent-wise and if we're, if we do have at least one of those guys out there, maybe even two, you feel like this is a game that Carolina shouldn't really have much trouble with. Now, again, it is a road game. It is a 12 o'clock start. So, those things seem to have been, factors throughout the year. And I think that, again, it won't be easy with the early start time and the road environment at Wake. I don't really think it's going to be all that great, but you never really know, especially because they are playing Carolina. But, this is a team in Wake Forest, like you mentioned. I mean, Danny Manning is probably gone after the season's over. I'd be very shocked if he returns because people just feel like this program's going in the wrong direction. And, it's kind of a shame because I thought Danny Manning had this team turned in the right direction and trending upward at, the beginning of last year, and really since then it's kind of gone in the opposite direction. They really only have one guy in Rodney Childers that I think is really going to make any sort of impact. I think just about everybody else, Carolina, they are depleted, but ultimately, again, it's an ACC game, so I think it's always tough. It's never going to be just walk in and automatically come away with a win. But again, another team that really is solid but not great on the glass, and really has struggled to put up some points throughout the season. So I think Carolina, on the road, it's not really that far of a travel though, and I think that there's just way too much there. I think Carolina wins, and it's probably by double digits to get themselves back in the win column and get to 10 conference wins ahead of what should be a great closing stretch that'll start with a phenomenal game against Duke.
Childress is pacing the Demon Deacons with 15 points a game, 4 assists. Inside, Jalen Ward is giving them 8 boards a game. So they've really got one capable guy on the wing and a capable guy inside, which is enough to give Carolina a game. Miami came into the Smith Center a week ago with really one guy that was going to put up points, and maybe one guy was going to grab rebounds and took them to overtime. I do worry if Carolina overlooks this game. And then, this was a pre thought before today's media conference where they asked Roy Williams about it, and he joked that he might die before they play Duke anyway, so he's not looking forward to that game yet. As far as I know, the team should be ready to go because before you get to Duke, you have to play Wake Forest, so you need to give that game your full attention and understand it's a road game. They might have a good win, but they'll still fill that arena up and try to cheer like crap to beat Carolina. But like you said, you find a way to get the win, you're setting up a monster game for next Wednesday, and I think that's what's going to happen. I think Luke May bounces back in a really big way. So does Kobe White. I don't believe Nazir Little will play. So, I think everyone's going to have to pick up the slack a little bit. I think this team will rally behind that and find a way to get another road win that move to 6-1 on the road in ACC play, more importantly, 10-2 overall, and keeping pace with Duke for first place. And, just really continue to enjoy great success after we all thought the season was in the tube after that Louisville loss. So, this is a 12 o'clock tip. So like you said, an early tip will be on ACC Network Extra, so check the local listings for that. If not, always find that game on the Watch ESPN app. And now we'll go ahead, and once we start winding this down, we'll get to the Beat the Buzzer segment. A lot of nuggets in this one. Kobe White was named the Freshman of the Week in the ACC. Luke May was named ACC Player of the Week for his performances against NC State and Miami a week ago. Luke May and Cameron Johnson were both named to the Wooden Midseason Award list, which is kind of weird because Cam Johnson wasn't a finalist for the top small forward award, but makes the Wooden Midseason Award. That's kind of baffling to me. The injury updates, it is confirmed that there will be no Sterling tomorrow, no Leaky. Nazir Little is a game-time decision depending on how practice went today, how his ankle responds in the morning workout before the game. And Cam Johnson, who's dealing with an ankle injury as well, is expected to play. And hopefully he can, because if not, then we're really going to be then, maybe like you said, going 6 deep. And the last thing, which was more of a little fun topic, we had discussed the throwback the team wore against NC State, and they brought them out against Virginia. And I just wanted your opinion on them. I know we got beat, so it's not cool when you look good and get beat, but are you a guy that likes throwbacks as much as some people think that should be our new uniform? And it's like you go back to the old because it looks very new, or or do you want to keep the Argyle stuff we have going on?
I love the throwback uniforms, and I think they look great. But, I'm a guy that grew up in the generation of the Argyle on the side of the pants and on the side of the jersey. So, I don't really care either way. I just want my team to go out and perform the way that they're capable of. And, I don't think that anybody should say, well, we should never wear those jerseys again because we lost to Virginia and then, well, we beat State in them. So, I think it kind of balances itself out. And in the end, it's just a jersey. I don't think it really is the difference as to whether or not you win or lose games. But, of course, you always love the throwback look. And I think, the ones that they brought out this year definitely look awesome and are something that, I wouldn't mind seeing the team wear, a little more often if they wanted to go to that. But at the same time, I do love the Argyle, and, whichever one they were to stick with, I wouldn't mind either way.
Yeah, I wish, I'm a big fan of the Argyle, and now it's kind of like synonymous with Carolina, like the old well is. Like, when you think of Carolina basketball, the Argyle, the football program has it on the helmet, around the collar, and down the pants line. The baseball program has it. I think soccer. I think almost every major sport has it on their uniform. I wish they could incorporate the foot on the side of the pants, like maybe at the bottom where the Argyle stops. But then again, it could just be overdoing it and just be too much on the uniform. But they did look really good. I do think that if they would have lost the stadium, they might not have ever worn, because they wore a throwback or a retro uniform at Miami Marcus Page's freshman year that we got blown out in, and Roy Williams made it very adamant with his superstition ways, we'll never wear that crap again. But which just really fun. They were doing to honor that '69 Final Four team, which was the third straight team of Gene Smith that went to the Final Four, that really jump-started this program into a national power. So I understand why they're doing it, win or loss. Need to honor the great teams that this program has had. So with that, we'll go ahead and wind this thing down. Is there anything else you need to add to tonight's Roy's Boys podcast?
No, I just want to say, it should be a good game tomorrow, but I think, we're ready. It's going to be a sensational podcast coming up. The next one, you guys are going to want to tune into that for sure, because that game against Duke, I was talking the other day on the other podcast that I do, separate from both the Roy's Boys and Heel Tough blog podcast, and I've said, this is going to be one of the better matchups in this rivalry in a long, long time. So, while I am, of course, not overlooking the game against Wake Forest, and I think, there will be some work cut out for the Tar Heels, especially if there are the injury issues that we talked about. I think that, all Tar Heel fans are ready, and I know, for sure we're both ready to talk about this huge matchup against the Duke Blue Devils that'll be taking place on Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. Really looking forward to breaking that game down to the fullest extent we can, but we got to get through Wake Forest first, and we'll do that tomorrow at 12. I do want to encourage you guys to check out the blog. I've already got the preview for tonight's game or tomorrow game up. It's on Facebook and Twitter. Check out Anthony's Heel Tough blog, which covers Carolina football. That is still landing big recruits for upcoming recruiting classes. So Mac Brown's continuing to be a killer on the recruiting show with him and the new staff. And his podcast as well. I know he just released an episode the other night breaking down this past signing day class, so check that out. You can become a subscriber to this podcast through Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. So we encourage you to that as well. I want to thank you guys for listening. Go Tar Heels.